So one of the things we hear often is, what's the difference in mental health issue versus spiritual issues? Now, I talked about that a little bit earlier in that I believe that all of life is spiritual. When you think about it, God created life, and God is a spirit. Okay? So what he did was he breathed this life into us as, physical beings, but our life is on the inside, right? Your heart, mind, soul, and strength. That's the greatest commandment. Love God with all of these things. And we're created in God's image. And so as spiritual beings, then we have this immaterial life that lives out in the physical body. So sometimes when people say, mental health issues, or let's say even emotional issues, they kind of bifurcate that from spiritual issues, which usually when you hear that, what somebody means is a spiritual issue is either call it a religious practice, discipleship, kind of spiritual formation purview, like prayer, a spiritual issue. How do you resolve spiritual issues? Prayer, Bible study, spiritual disciplines, etc. And so they kind of work backwards when you deconstruct it. So if something's a spiritual issue, then you prescribe these things. Something's an emotional issue, then you got to go to counseling, and there's other stuff. Well, I think if somebody's depressed, what you're going to see is that, Changes That Heal talks about, there's a lot of reasons you can be depressed, and I think all of them have spiritual roots. Right? The biggest cause of depression is broken relationship. We're designed to be bonded and connected like God is. Instead, we're alienated. Alienation is the fundamental spiritual issue that the gospel reconciles. Alienated from God, alienated from each other, alienated even within our own selves. And so depression comes from isolation, comes from emotional detachment, being cut off, not being connected, not being bonded. To be brought out of that state and reconnected, as Ephesians 4, when we're separated from the life of God, to be brought back into that and connected, that is a spiritual solution to a spiritual problem. All this stuff is spiritual. Now, sometimes, if you take the spiritual, everything is spiritual, that does include prayer as well. It does include Bible study. It does include scripture memorization. It does include service. It does include finding your gifts. Now, most of your gifts you're going to see are in the service of getting people, in these other processes, as the New Testament teaches. But we've kind of turned spiritual into, a lot of times, something religious and not something that has the life practicality of the New Testament and the gospel itself. The other thing, spiritual, is sometimes people are meaning supernatural. And there's certainly, if our gospel is not supernatural, then we're not reading the New Testament. People that have turned the gospel into a system of principles, and somehow the supernatural aspect is going to come back when Jesus returns, they're not reading the New Testament. There are supernatural gifts in the New Testament, and there's healing. There's supernatural gifts of wisdom and knowledge and prophecy and a bunch of other things that heal. Those are really, really important. But a lot of times what people are meaning when they say spiritual problem, they mean somebody's got, demonic oppression, for example, or demonic possession and deliverance and all of that. So one of the things that's really, really important is that we understand that in a certain way, this disintegration of thinking some things in life can't be touched by spiritual solutions is just wrong. Economic failure is a spiritual problem. It's communities that break apart. It's resources that are not stewarded well. It's relationships that are broken. It's families that are torn apart and people aren't raised with their needs taken care of. It's leaders and people that have power that oppress workers. Those are all spiritual problems. So let's reclaim what the gospel says we're supposed to be stewards of, and that's to enter into and reconcile all of life. And let's not pretend that spiritual is just this little bitty piece over here.